The third largest pension fund in the world just set off the sovereign wealth fund and pension fund FOMO, following in the tracks of the largest pension fund that we saw just a few days ago. Now, will this cause the supply shock? And why is nobody talking about the sovereign wealth fund and pension fund FOMO that we are seeing in the Bitcoin space now? Everybody's talking about the corporate treasuries, potential governments, Bitcoin strategic reserves, but the sovereign wealth funds are going to be the reason for the Bitcoin supply shock. I'm going to dive into all of that here today. But first, let's dive into the breaking news that we saw where South Korea National Pension Fund has increased its Bitcoin exposure by 182% in the first half of this year. Some have even said it's increased it by 226% because of its all crypto-linked stocked holdings. So South Korea National Pension Fund boosted its quote-unquote crypto-related stock holdings to 556 million in Q2, reflecting institutional confidence in the digital assets, where it doubled and tripled down. Coinbase, Block, Robinhood, and Strategy hold surging to 226%. This move, quote-unquote, legitimizes the asset class and challenges the remaining stock volatility, including some regulatory risks and some other issues that people are looking at with all of this. But the reality of all of this, what it shows is that, hey, you know what? We are starting to see we're starting to see the national pension and other funds start to come through and really look at Bitcoin as a big time asset. Is Bitcoin going to be the new future of retirement accounts because of how much wealth we are seeing get drained out of the system on a daily basis? So now we are seeing Abu Dhabi, which I went over a couple days ago, allocate funds to the BlackRock ETF, looking at 681.5 million, right? And they're looking at the UAE's doubling and tripling down, saying it might be the second biggest sector in 5 years because of the massive growth and business regulations that they are seeing in this sector. So the UAE is looking at Bitcoin and this as something we need to double, triple, quadruple down and continue to see the rise and all that. Then on top of it, if you look at this, the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, well, what did we see not too long ago? The Norwegian sovereign wealth fund double and triple down on its Bitcoin exposure here last quarter, boosting its exposure by 83% in a single quarter. Now, what does that mean for all of these Bitcoin treasury companies here coming forward? Because this is where we're going to start to see the FOMO really take off, right? Because now we have the US talking about the plan for establishing a United States sovereign wealth fund, right? I mean, this is going to be absolutely massive. The amount of money that we could potentially start to see shooting into this account here could be actually drastic, because once the United States puts through a sovereign wealth fund, that's where we're going to get some craziness go along. And it's not like these guys are just increasing their holdings by a little bit, let's say. They're massively increasing these exposures, and they're doing it in a very quick and short period of time. I mean, in 2 quarters, 182% increase in a single asset class. You just don't see that, especially with the amount of money coming in at play here. So there's a lot of questions surrounding Bitcoin's legitimacy and everything else, right? Everybody's saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be putting Bitcoin in 401ks, retirement plans. It's too volatile, yada, yada, yada. Watch what they do, not what they say, right? Because they are rapidly increasing these holdings, and it just seems to be accelerating, right? So we have 3 of the biggest pension funds and sovereign wealth funds in the world doing that. And then we have the United States potentially adding to that. Now, to review, right? For those of you guys who have been coming to this channel, thank you so much for always coming in. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and that like button, smoking it like Cheech and Chong. But we've got Howard Lutnick, right, who is now in charge of the United States Sovereign Wealth Fund. Now, I know this is his Wikipedia page, and it might be hard to read for you guys, but he was the founder and executor and chief executive officer of Cantor Fitzgerald. Now, let's review. Cantor Fitzgerald's portfolio, 43.75% in MSTR. Then they've got NVIDIA. They've got iBit in here. They've got Rumble. They've got all of these guys that have Robinhood, all of these guys that have exposure to Bitcoin. Now, what I've been preaching from the rooftops here is that there's been a potential of the Bitcoin supply shock. I know you guys have heard me say this a time or two, but as we keep getting more and more of these guys, big players like, these sovereign wealth funds come in and buy Bitcoin and buy, these MSTRs of the world. Well, where's MSTR and all of these guys getting their Bitcoin from? They're getting it from these OTC desks, right? So I've been preaching to you guys here that the OTC desks, they're running low. They're at multi-year lows for the amount of Bitcoin on OTC desks, nearly at 155,000 Bitcoin right now. So it's super low. We've got Bitcoin on exchanges at a 2.2 roughly million Bitcoin on exchanges. And then we have guys like Michael Saylor just continuing to buy and issue more debt. We're going to go into some of the breaking news from MicroStrategy here in a bit and what else we've been seeing. But all of these publicly traded companies that come online continuing to buy, well, they will continue to buy up and scoop up more and more Bitcoin as long as they keep getting funding to do so. Now, they can only get funding to do so if these big players keep coming in and buying all of the shares so they could issue more and more debt. Now, while MSTR and all of these guys alike will continue to do that, it'll be interesting to see how these sovereign wealth funds and others start to react, especially since we've seen a recent decoupling of sorts, right? It hasn't happened completely, but a recent decoupling of sorts from the Bitcoin Treasury companies and the overall Bitcoin price. Because as you guys have seen, right, the Bitcoin price has been humming along, right? All right, we're down a little bit today and down a little bit this week, but Bitcoin hit an all-time high midweek last week, hitting 124,000. And then if you look at the MSTR price, if you look back the past 5 days, MSTR has been down 9.4%. Now, if we look at these Bitcoin Treasury companies and how they've been performing, well, it would seem like there has been a little bit of a decoupling when it comes to the overall Bitcoin price and these treasury companies. And everybody always talked about, hey, these guys, MSTR, they're a levered play. But when Bitcoin hit all new time highs, we saw MSTR, SIPO, H100, Metaplanet, all of these guys down by a good portion here, right? MSTR down 29%, all the way down to nearly 79% down, while Bitcoin was humming to new all-time highs. So we got to keep a very close eye on how these treasury companies react to the Bitcoin price, especially with the amount of money that is getting poured in from the big players, because this is something that they're going to be keeping a very close eye on. And, the MSTR flywheel that has been updated a little bit, but I like to show this image because I think it's the easiest and simplest to understand here. Now, this reflexive flywheel only works when Bitcoin's price goes up and MSTR's market cap goes up. So although Bitcoin's price has been increasing, well, there has been a little bit of a wrinkle here where MSTR hasn't been increasing as Bitcoin has been increasing. So will MicroStrategy be able to issue more debt in order to buy more Bitcoin? That is the question. I think they will be able to, just because of what MSTR, the brand name, Michael Saylor, the marketing that he does, right? There is going to be some of these Bitcoin treasury companies that do not last. I want everybody to be very cautious when they are doing that, investing in these Bitcoin treasury companies, because it's not a sure bet, so to speak, right? The only sure bet is buying Bitcoin. And that's why I think everybody should be buying Bitcoin, holding on for dear life, the hodl mentality. You know, even though we have the potential hodler's dilemma where you are not buying and holding, right? You're potentially needing to sell in order to live your lifestyle. Well, I've got a solution for you guys with Salt Lending. So if you go to saltlending.com/greencandle, or the link down below in the description, you could go down there and they give you some of the best rates in the industry, starting at 8.95% with a duration of 12 months. And they'll let you borrow up to 70% LTV. They've got no prepayment fees, no credit checks, and best of all, no rehypothecation. So you don't have to worry about any funny business going on. Now, get your Lightning wallets ready, because I'm going to give you guys some of this generational wealth that we've all been trying to accumulate, courtesy of my friends over at Bitcoin Well. Now, if you go to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle, you could sign up today and get yourself some Bitcoin as well. If you sign up, they'll give you 500 points. You buy Bitcoin. That's 2 spins on the Bitcoin wishing well, with the potential to win 1 million sats. So go ahead and do that ASAP like Rocky. Now, make sure you guys are smoking that like and hitting that subscribe button. Boom, 406 sats straight to your dome piece. Now, if you missed out on that, make sure you guys are going to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle. I might have flipped away from that a little quick, but bitcoinwell.com/greencandle. And you got to do it quick, because MSTR just issued some equity guidance here, which I think is very interesting, and we need to dive into a little bit here as to the accumulation strategy of what we could potentially see going forward. I mean, Michael Saylor is telling you guys and doing all of this out loud and getting more and more treasury companies on board for all of this, right? So Freedom Guy thinks that they're going to manipulate the Bitcoin price. Look, the Bitcoin market cap is so big that it is not going to be manipulated by potentially these guys, right? I think it's, maybe BlackRock, maybe MSTR can manipulate the price. But these other guys, man, they're just not enough money coming in just yet. So if you look at it and you look at the guidance, above 4.0 MNAV, they're going to be actively issuing MSTR to buy more Bitcoin, right? What is the MNAV at right now? 1.6, right? So they told us exactly what they're going to do. Between 2.5 and 4, they will opportunistically issue MSTR to acquire Bitcoin. So they'll be a little bit, let's say, more calculated here. Now, below 2.5, they will tactically issue MSTR to pay interest on debt obligations, fund preferred equity dividends, and when otherwise deemed advantageous to the company. Now, they are basically in this range right here, where they're saying it's about 210. That's their share price target, right? Anywhere from 210 to 600. And we're sitting here at 360, right? So they straight up just told you exactly what they're doing as we see them buy more Bitcoin and go through it here, right? And, we see more and more of these Bitcoin treasury strategy companies come on. I mean, Michael Saylor just like retweets all of them, right? AMDAX is a new one. Amsterdam's Bitcoin treasury company. Metaplanet, of course, right? He's tweeting this out every single Sunday where there's not enough orange. Look at how many buys that we've seen Michael Saylor do within this past year. Since Trump has come into office, Michael Saylor and MSTR has purchased over 60% of their holdings. That is massive. Now, you can go and verify this yourself. You don't need me to come to Strategy's website and do this, but if you go to Strategies, right, and you look at their purchases, you literally go through, it's literally, they've missed 2 weeks this entire year since 1/6. I mean, maybe even earlier this year. I mean, look at this. They've bought Bitcoin. They've maybe missed 2 weeks. They've missed 2 weeks ever since Trump got elected. That is absolutely crazy. Since Trump won the election back in November of last year, they've missed 2 weeks worth of Bitcoin buying. It's astronomical, the amount that these guys are buying, and they just keep increasing it, right? And it's crazy because it's not just MSTR as this whale that is coming in and buying Bitcoin. I mean, look, Adam Back today was saying, hey, weak hands are selling cheap sats to the Bitfinex whale. They have a Bitfinex whale buying in $600 a second. So a whale is selling cheap sats, and our whale is selling, and the Bitfinex, a Bitfinex whale is buying literally the amount of Bitcoin that's mined every single day. 450 Bitcoin mined every single day right now. So this single whale wallet is buying enough. And then look, we've got all of these 100 publicly traded companies buying more and more Bitcoin, 168 of them. We have 977,000 Bitcoin just held from publicly traded companies. That's going to reach a full Satoshi. I wouldn't doubt it if it reaches it by the end of this quarter. Another 33,000 Bitcoin potentially by the end of this quarter. I wouldn't doubt that that's coming soon. Right? And everybody's seeing the amount of Bitcoin getting scooped off of the exchanges, and Bitcoin sitting at 116,000, looking ripe and cheap, right? Meanwhile, the US is sitting on their hands waiting for these, the sovereign wealth funds to come out. But if you look at everybody else, right? South Korea is not waiting. Why would they wait? Norway's not waiting. Why would they wait? So the United States is waiting while the big money managers are starting to come in. But I think that the United States is waiting and unable to move very quickly. And what we saw previously from Bo Hines leaving Trump's admin, I think not a lot of people are talking about that, right? I think a lot of people kind of swept that under the rug. Oh, you know what? He's a young guy. He wants to get back into the private sector. You could just make more money in the private sector. I don't think so. I think Bo Hines is a true Bitcoiner behind the scenes. And I think he saw exactly what I'm lining out here. The OTC desks are losing Bitcoin at a rapid pace. There's simply just not a ton of Bitcoin left on exchanges. And the amount of buying that the government can do, it's going to take a long time before they're able to get all this, right? It's going to take a long time before the United States government is able to buy Bitcoin, just period. So I think that this slow movement really swayed Bo Hines away from it. So I've talked about these 50-year cycles with Mark Moss previously, right? Everybody talks about the 4-year cycles, but I think money kind of goes in this 50-year type of cycle, right? I've talked about it on this channel a few different times, but for those of you guys who have missed it, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you come back and you hear me blabbing about it. But the first 10 years, you'll see retail start to come on. So like from 2008 to 2020, that's what we really saw. It was retail FOMO. Then now this decade, we're starting to see corporate treasuries. So institutions really start to embrace Bitcoin. Then the third 10 years, that's when we'll start to see governments come on. So sure, we have, small guys like El Salvador, the Kingdom of Bhutan starting to embrace Bitcoin. And I think maybe we'll get a few other small players. But when we get the US to actually start to embrace Bitcoin, I'm projecting it's going to be a little bit later, folks. I don't think we're going to get any movement, any actionable steps towards all this until 28 or later. I don't think Trump's going to be able to do it. He's got an uphill battle, right? TF is saying, hey, it's going to be that budget neutral way, which is just involving confiscation, which is essentially what they've done, right? I mean, we heard Scott Bessent the other day come out and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to be buying any more Bitcoin. And everybody was up in arms on that. But they've been saying this for a while. So for those of you guys paying attention, you guys knew that this was essentially coming, right? You knew that, hey, these budget neutral ways, it ain't too gravy here, folks. We're not necessarily humming along and buying all this 150,000 Bitcoin, 155,000 Bitcoin very quickly. Right? I mean, Saylor will continue to have all of these buys here. And that's why Bo Hines left. He didn't like that we needed to have these budget neutral ways, right? And Scott Bessent came out and said, hey, you know what? Everybody's been suggesting, why don't we revalue the gold? This would be a perfect budget neutral way. And then we'd magically get billions of dollars just popping up because all we did was, hey, you know what? Gold is not $40 an ounce anymore. But no. The United States is not going to do that. We're going to move very slowly. Look, everybody's been impressed with the things that, DJT has been able to do. But at the end of the day, he's still somewhat handcuffed with all of this. And this is flipping everything on its head, right? You saw how quickly Elon got out of Doge, right? Say what you want about all of these guys. But at the end of the day, the GDP to debt ratio at 123%, the debt at $37 trillion. I mean, all these things that we see are just rapidly growing. And, there's theories over here about how this cycle is going to be different. Even we got CNBC saying, hey, you know what? This Bitcoin cycle might be different. This might be the end of the 4-year cycles. A major historical Bitcoin cycle that dictates it might be breaking. It typically traded in this 4-year cycle, but recently that cycle that had a predictable pattern has shown signs of breaking or disappearing altogether. Number of factors. Right? I've talked about some of these factors here, and some of those might be that supply shock that we potentially see here coming in. But it's interesting that we're starting to see everybody, even the traditional media here, now look at Bitcoin and say, hey, you know what? We might be wrong about this whole 4-year cycle thing. It might be changing of the tides. And TradFi coming into Bitcoin and seeing this, well, I think that they got to be watching, how all of this different behavior is going because, I think it's interesting when we see the overall hash rate continue to increase, right? So when Bitcoin hash rate has hit all-time highs, and it seems to keep hitting these all-time highs, every other day, right? I mean, look at this. This was August 15th. So on Friday, it hit a new record for global Bitcoin mining hash rate. The price generally follows shortly thereafter. Now, if you guys want a piece of this Bitcoin mining hash rate, look, I don't necessarily recommend doing it on your own. Go to the friends over at Simple Mining. You could go to simplemining.io/green candle. You have to go to the /green candle and schedule a call with them today. Now, there's a lot of different benefits for going with Simple Mining. Not only will they give listeners of this channel a free year. That's right, you heard it here, a free year worth of repairs. But you know what they'll also do, folks? They'll also give you guys a 7-day free trial. Yes, so if you've ever considered to get Bitcoin, a Bitcoin miner up and running, I'd recommend you guys go to simplemining.io/green candle. Schedule a call today. They could give you different tax depreciation benefits and all of these different great benefits of mining. And you could just have sats stacking for you in the background, and you'll get a free year of maintenance there. So go ahead to simplemining.io/green candle and get a piece of that hash rate today, because hell, I mean, we're seeing whales scoop up Bitcoin faster than it's being mined. So there might not be enough Bitcoin for you to buy here pretty soon, folks. It might be, all disappearing off these exchanges here pretty quickly. And, we even got Safedine on Moose, and I think I lost some sound here, so I'm not going to play this. But, he went on a recent podcast saying it's growing faster than anything in history. It's going to easily be $100 trillion. And that will mean Bitcoin surpasses gold. So I think that this is going to continue to, see the Bitcoin price, skyrocket in flight, because, Bitcoin is just humming along here. And I think that we'll start to see all of these things really come to fruition and come to light here very quickly, because supply is almost gone. I appreciate you guys all coming to the chat. Make sure you're smoking that like Cheech and Chong, and hitting that subscribe button, telling a friend to tell a friend, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.